So welcome to the second webinar in the series All Life is Yoga, webinar series by the Gnostic Centre as a tribute to Sri Aurobindo in his 150th year. This is the second webinar. The topic is the challenge of the world crises and our response. The whole idea of the series is to take up contemporary issues and look at them from a deeper inner perspective. So on the panel, we generally have practitioners who are engaging with the outer world and bridging with the inner world. Devdeep Ganguly, he's the moderator for today's session. He has been part of the Sri Aurobindo ashram all his life. He teaches there social and political thought of Sri Aurobindo, Indian history, culture, and is very well versed in the world affairs currently and from the consciousness perspective. So I invite Devdeep, and please do keep your mics on mute. At the end, you will have a chance to ask questions. Thank you. Devdeep.
Good evening, good morning, wherever you're joining us from. I'm really delighted to invite all of you to listen to this session, which we have titled The Challenge of World Crises and Our Response. The origin of this program actually emerged from Anuradha, and in one of our classes that we have online on the ideal of human unity, this question came up. This was during the time when there were lots of world events which were troubling, such as the problems in Afghanistan, the forest fires around the world, and indeed at every level, if we look around us, any sensitive person would feel that economically, politically, socially, one might even say spiritually, there is a crisis that humanity is confronted with. And while this is not new, we have had a number of instances in the past 100 years, and of course, even before that, when we've had challenges to face as the human race. But the scale and complexity of these challenges seem to be increasing with the passage of time. And more as individuals, we ask ourselves, how do we respond to these challenges? What can we do in our little circle of existence to help in overcoming these problems? So that is the basis with which we started thinking about this webinar. And when I was asked to moderate this session, I thought of a few persons who I feel could share something of their work and their approach to this problem. So we have 4 very interesting persons with us this evening, joining us from 3 different continents in very diverse fields of work, but each of them doing some really interesting, remarkable work, and in their own way, trying to bridge the inner and the outer challenges. So let me introduce them to you very briefly. So in alphabetical order, I want to start with Ant Sore. So Mr. Sore has been a corporate lawyer for many years now, but his work interest has taken him to found an NGO called Humanium in 2008, which works with essentially with child rights in Africa and Asia. And he's also been involved with other activities such as holistic village development and various other works to help in the alleviation of rights, access to rights around the world. I know Ant for almost 20 years. We met completely by chance in 2003 on the banks of the river Ganga in Varanasi. I was a student in college. Ant had come to India on his own quest, and we happened to sit next to each other in a small restaurant, which was incidentally called Madhur Milan Cafe, which literally means the cafe of good meetings. So this was a very interesting coincidence, but it has shaped, it led to a friendship which has lasted for very long, and an association also of Ant with Pondicherry and Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. And I truly admire many aspects of Ant's work and his personality. I just want to mention that in 2016, Ant had a life-changing experience. Perhaps if he feels open to sharing about it, he'll tell us a little about that. Moving on, next we have Mr. Gautam Chikarmane, who is Vice President at Observer Research Foundation. Gautam has been a journalist at leading publications in India for many years and a writer. More recently, he has moved to working in a think tank, which is the Observer Research Foundation, is one of India's most influential and biggest think tanks. His special focus is on economy, social public policy, as well as a keen interest in Indian mythology and spirituality. Gautam has been a student of Sri Aurobindo's writings for decades, and he has a long association with the ashram. His latest book. Yeah, I think Anuradha, you might have to mute some of. Yeah, perfect. So Gautam's latest book is India 2030, which was published by Penguin, where he invited a number of authors to write about various aspects of India in the coming decade. And he's also, we are actually, both of us, co-editing a book on Sri Aurobindo's collected works, which we hope will come out within the next 6 to 8 months. Dr. Kent Davis Packard is president and executive director of Women Forward International, which was launched in 2019. She has taught courses at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, courses on global women's issues, on US foreign policy in the Middle East. She's a features editor for a magazine at the London School of Economics, and she has had a vast experience in many countries. And she has a book on contemporary Islamic thought, which is forthcoming. And she's also fluent in a number of languages. We look forward to listening to Dr. Davis Packard speak about her work. Her organization focuses on advancing the issues related to women for the sake of advancing humanity as a whole. Finally, we have Dr. Praveer Malik. Dr. Praveer Malik is founder of Deep Order Technologies in the US, and he has been associated with a number of companies over the last 3 decades. Over the years, he has been developing a unified theory and mathematics of organization. And over the last 2 or 3 years, he's been very actively involved in this work. He has a 10-book series entitled The Cosmology of Light, which is a path-breaking approach to bringing about organizational change. And he's a regular contributor to Forbes magazine. And he has a keen interest in quantum computing, artificial intelligence, genetics, so on. Between 2002 and 2004, Dr. Malik was in Pondicherry, and he taught a course when I was a student in the Sri Aurobindo International Centre of Education here. And he taught us a course on the flowering of organizations, which was a very interesting approach to how we think about organizations in the context of consciousness. So we have 4 panelists from very diverse backgrounds, and I'm looking forward to the interactions that we will have together. This session is going to last about 90 minutes, and we are going to divide it into 4 parts. After the introductions are over, our first question to each of the panelists will be about their work and what specific problem or challenge they feel they are addressing through their work. So we will hear a little bit about what they do. The next round, we'll delve a little deeper, and we will want to understand how they respond to the challenges that they face in their work, in their communities, and globally as well as individuals. How do they respond to the crises that surround us, both personally as well as in a collective sense? The overarching title of these webinars organized by the Gnostic Centre is All Life is Yoga. And so effectively, we want to understand how do we turn all of life into an inner spiritual practice. So this is the approach that we will be trying to evolve through this webinar. And then the final part of this evening's program will be a question and answer session. First, the participants themselves will be perhaps if they have questions for each other, and then we'll open out the questions to the audience. A quick word, I would request all of us who are joining us on Zoom to please mute themselves. And if you could also mute your video, that would be very nice, so that you'll be able to see us. And then during the question answer session, if you wish to unmute your video feed, that's fine. The second thing is, if you have questions, you can post them in the chat box of the Zoom app. For those of us who are joining us on YouTube, you can leave comments under the YouTube chat window, the YouTube video window, and somebody will pick them up and relay them to me, and we'll put them to the audience. So with that, I wish to start on the first round of the first round of questions that I have for the panelists, and to reframe the specific question that we are going to delve right now. So starting with Ant, what we would like to look at is, what fundamental problem or challenge are you trying to address through your work? Why is this work important for you? How were you inspired to do this work? A little elaboration on what you do, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the for the invitation, Dave. Well, let's start like that. It is 100% honest. When I was 7 years old, I heard that there were 12,000 children dying every day. That is 40 years ago, huh? So it's a long time ago, but still the number 12,000 stuck in my mind, and I was shocked. I would say, traumatized. And then something in my mind said, hey, you have to do something about that. I couldn't have formulated in that way when I was by that age, but something in me, something deeper, somewhere in my deeper self, something changed. And then over the years, of course, and I thought like, hey, you must do something about this. This is just not for 12,000, every child that dies is one too much. I mean, that's just, especially for reasons that are avoidable. So, and I studied law, I did my thing, but that didn't let me go. So like 15 years ago, that's the reason why I moved to Geneva, because here's the UN, as you all know. It's still the city of peace worldwide. That's what Geneva says about itself. And we have about 2,000 presidents and ministers coming from all over the world every year to discuss peace and freedom and so on. And we did our thing with Humanium, and we do child rights. We have child rights on every country in the world. So we really check it every year, and in 197 countries in the world. So we have about 6 million website visitors, and we do it in a very simple way. So every poor man, every poor woman, every poor child can understand what we are talking about. So it's a very simple way. And even though today there are only 6,000-7,000 children dying every day, but as I said, one is one too much. I mean, they should be living. And I think we all are weird. Today we are not 3 billion anymore as we were when I was a child, but today we are about 8 billion people. So, and the world has tiny resources. So in that sense, we must all think a little bit smaller about ourselves, and that's what I'm kind of doing in my work at Humanium, and also as a lawyer. I'm working in a 50% as a lawyer in a company, so I can do my volunteer in my NGO and really help in India and in Rwanda in the field. And I don't know, I think we must all think a little bit smaller, so to say, in terms of using all these energies. They're limited in the world, and yes, maybe that's enough as a start, Dave, and we dive deeper later.
Do you want to tell us a bit about, you've also done some work in village development?
In the village development work? Well, I mean, there's just so much to say about that over the last 15 years. we are always trying to really motivate the children to find their inner selves. So really their own resources, to find their own inner leaders. And that is so important, and little community building. So we all have our needs, challenges, wishes, and we try to empower the youngsters and also the trainers who work with them on an everyday basis to really group them together, and so they stay together. They make good communities, strong communities who stand together, stand up in the next 50 years, whatever is in front of everyone.
Thank you, Ant. Thank you for that quick intro. Next, can I ask Gautam to please speak a little about his work and how it relates to, in the context of how it relates to what he envisions for India, for the world, his wishes, his ideals. Gautam, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Since this is a discussion on crisis, global crisis, I thought we would talk about that. But if you want to know about my vision of the world, that's even better. So I'm a writer. And in my earlier lives, I've been a reporter, an editor. I have run newsrooms, and I have had some of the best reporters and teams. I've tracked finance, markets. I've tracked banking, macroeconomics, geoeconomics, geopolitics, technology, corporations, China, Pakistan, EU, US. I today work in a think tank, but you know something, with every job that I have worked in every specific assignment that I have had, I have felt that, and this has been a constant, that it's a dream job. So I just love my work. I enjoy at every point in time, whatever I did, I have enjoyed it from the, complete. I have felt blessed. Of course, sometimes behind the job, there are promoters and proprietors who have not seen me as a blessing, and we've had some conflicts and crises, but that's okay. Sometimes they have friends and they have vested interests, which I have trampled upon and I've had to leave. That too is fine. It's par for the course. But as long as I was working, I gave the pages, the teams, the job, my write-ups, everything I had, every part of me, my being was in those words, in those pages, in those images. I've been tracking world-shifting events, and again, I feel so blessed to be to have been a journalist at that time. For instance, when the journey of India's economic reforms began in 1991, was the time that I entered the job market. Those reforms continue today, and I have been lucky to have tracked them intimately. Reform after reform, change after change, the economic rise of India, the life-changing event called the internet happened before me, which today people take for granted. I was there. I was there tracking it when it happened. I've also engaged with crises, and which is what I wanted to talk about in this particular discussion, both domestic and global. So the Asian crisis of the mid-1990s, the rise of Islamic terror that began in September 2001. I went to the heart of this event in Washington and New York. A month later, I was there. I spoke to everyone who needed to be spoken to. I met them personally. I saw the people grieving. I even saw the smoke and a little bit of the ashes that were left a month later. It was still there, not a month later, about 3 weeks later. The transatlantic economic crisis that began in September 2008 and gave rise to G20 as the board of directors, I was there. In the first meeting that happened in Washington, I was there. It was a mega crisis. It was a transatlantic crisis that got repackaged as a global crisis. There was nothing global about it. It was an American crisis. It was a European crisis, which of course had repercussions across the board. I've tracked Pakistan as a country that uses terror as state policy. I've tracked how China is using 5G technology to control the world and how it is now failing in doing that. I'm tracking the violence that's rising in India and across the world. Violence is becoming an alternative to or attempting to be an alternative to a democratic discourse. The mob is becoming the new policymaker. And this is happening across the world. My engagements have been through ideas and words, through my writings, through my essays, columns, my books. Crises, I just want to, Devdeep, if it's okay, I just want to spend a minute on the crisis, because
Please.
I've been thinking a lot about these crises, and we'll explore the deeper parts of it in the next part of this discussion, I think. But crises of all shapes and textures have accompanied my writings: economic, social, security, terror, hegemonic. Every kind of crisis has found its way into my essays and my books. Crises will increase their asuric expressions for those who understand them. And with social media getting weaponized, brutality will get you 1,000 likes and retweets. It will also force policy changes on victims. This presents new problems of governance. The farm protests that are going on are we need to watch this very closely, because it's not just India, it's not just Delhi. I think the repercussions of this, the theory of this is going to percolate across the world. It is very important how we balance these various interest groups. Crises, as they increase in momentum, can become opportunities, as they can get countries, companies, citizens to concentrate. The balance of payments crisis of the 1990 resulted in reforms in 1991 that are going on till 30 years, even today, 30 years later. They have created the world's 6th largest economy, and soon to be, within this decade, the world's 3rd largest economy. That single crisis, because of which reforms were unleashed by Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, have carried on across prime ministers, across governments, across ideologies. Crisis gave us opportunities to build harmony, but what I am now seeing today, despite the fact that there has never been a period of so much peace ever, statistically, what I'm watching today, what I'm observing is that crisis is going on a downward spiral. They have embraced violence like never before. We thought violence and barbarism was a thing of the past, that it was going away, but no, it's here. We see it every day in the newspapers. We watch it on social media. Crises, in my opinion, are therefore not going to go away. They may change their shape. They are here to stay. And I think we need to learn how to deal with them, both in the outer worlds as well as inner worlds. And this is what I try to do with my writings. Thank you.
Thank you both. And that was a very nice introduction to your work. And indeed, I think the point that you make, that crises are also opportunities for the world to progress, is something that we need to reflect upon more deeply and see how to effect into reality. May I request now Kent to speak a little bit about her work and start the conversation.
Yes, thank you very much, Devdeep. It's wonderful to be here. Today happens to be October 16th, which is the day something called the New Life began. I'm going to share my screen briefly. Devdeep, can you see it?
Yes, we can see your screen. Yes.
And so the New Life began for a man named Avatar Meher Baba in India. And this new life, he said, was, quote, the voluntary suspension of the state of perfect master to become a common man and a perfect seeker. And in honor of the new life, I'm going to speak to this question of how we can respond to what are being called the current crises of the world from the angle of the common man. Normally, that angle is the one that is most disregarded. It's big institutions and wealthy benefactors who are known to make change and be the great men of the century, the great women of the century. But in my work at Women Forward International, the nonprofit Devdeep mentioned that I launched in 2019 with a mission to partner graduate students with outside organizations on action-oriented research to advance women. Something is becoming clearer, and my vision of that something has taken on a kind of relevance I had not expected. As a university professor, I always noticed the supreme valuing of our students' intellectual achievements and pursuits without much attention paid to what I have come to know as a much wiser type of knowing that could ultimately be the key to resolving these world crises, which have gone on despite all the mind's achievements. And that is the knowing of the heart. The famous intellectual philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote, quote, "We know the truth, not only by reason, but ever more by the heart." In my work, I recognize there is a new life being lived by our next generation. They thirst to surpass the mind and connect with their own hearts, putting their research into action, not to just have it sit on a shelf. So they know and feel themselves empowered to walk in the vanguard and serve humanity. We started at Women Forward with 6 partnerships. We moved to 10 this year, and we'll be operating in over a dozen countries next year with 12 partnerships, including 3 in Afghanistan. I'd like to show you a brief 2-minute video because I believe this work, the video will speak for itself. And now I have to find a way. Yes, sharing my screen. Okay.
As the sun watches over me, I lift my hands up, keeping my future close to my heart. Today, I reclaim my power. We are part of a larger group of people out there who are choosing to live according to a new law, the law of the heart. We know what needs to be done. The opportunity to build the world to which we all aspire is within reach.
The time is here now. We are one global family.
The women have made incredible gains, but this is a moment of potential peril.
That for every 1 poor man, there will be 18 women in poverty. Look at this ratio.
These large sums of money rarely reach the marginalized and have little or no effect on social change or economic justice.
When you invest in a woman, it has a ripple effect, not only changing that woman's life, but also their families and communities.
To raise up their voices and to offer a vision for a future where farms are spaces of empowerment. That was our task.
I am the next generation, independently standing my ground.
We've reached a point in universal history where mankind as a whole can begin to realize the fundamental truth that we all share one life.
So I will just finish by saying, so facing these crises, I no longer hold the view that it's going to be great institutions that will make real change. And it's not philanthropic giving, which could separate us more than unite us. It is rather that which we're witnessing all over the world at Women Forward International, the common man, the common woman, the inner knowing that we are all one.
Thank you. That's very beautiful, Kent. You know, one of the things which I particularly admire about your work is the fact that you bring in this aspect of something deeper in the question of women's studies and the challenges facing women. And it's not a superficial deeper, it's really the essence that has to change. And the other thing also is that there is also the element of aesthetics and beauty and art. I remember at the launch event there was poetry and there was music, and maybe we'll take up some of those aspects in the next round of questions that we have. Thank you once again. And Dr. Praveer Malik. Praveer, may I request you now to speak a little bit about the fascinating work that you have been involved with in changing and relooking how organizations can be structured.
Yes, thank you, Devdeep. I want to first just express gratitude to Gnostic Centre and Anuradha for organizing these webinars, and Devdeep for including me in this panel. It's been many years since we began interacting with each other, so it's really nice to be involved with this. The work that I've been involved in is primarily around addressing fragmentation. And the way that I do it is through the creation or the development of integrative frameworks. So, what does that mean and how do I ground it? The medium that I've used to ground it is basically book writing. And starting in the, I'd say around mid-90s, when I first, a couple of bubbles that I lived in were burst and I had a much more intimate contact with life outside myself and with business. There was a strong heart reaction at that point, and I ended up writing 2 books toward the end of the 1990s. But these books, they may have appealed to some people at the level of the heart, but I felt that they lacked the analytical rigor or depth to really allow change to happen at the organizational level. So I began to seek for something that would provide that analytical rigor and depth. And I had been introduced to Sri Aurobindo's Savitri some years before, and I was an avid reader of it. And there was a particular canto in that book that really spoke to me at the time. It was The World Stare. And there was a line there, a subtle pattern of the universe. It is within, below, without, above. And if you think about that, what that's describing, the fact that you've got this pattern repeating itself on different scale, that's the basis of a fractal. And it struck me that the deeper analysis that I wanted to put together had to do with fractals. So the author, of course, in Savitri goes on to describe these subsequent worlds, the physical worlds, vital worlds, mental worlds, and so on. And as I continue to read his poems, his poetry, the kind of fabric of what I was experiencing in the external world with people, with teams, with organizations became much clearer to me. And that inspired me to embark on this journey to write this 3-book series. The second book, interestingly, which framed a fractal framework, looked at the global financial crisis of 2008 and was suggesting a way to analyze that and step out of it using a different kind of thinking. But in my own journey and quest, I just wanted to go deeper. And there was what I'll call a fundamental pattern that gave rise to other patterns in this fractal framework. And I wanted to understand where this pattern emanated from and how prevalent it was and to what degree it really created sustainability across systems. And so I began to look at biological systems, chemical systems, physical systems, and went into the body of light itself. And I found that this pattern, it's a 4-fold pattern, really provides stability, and all 4 parts have to act simultaneously. So we may call them roughly knowledge, power, presence, harmony, if we try to name those 4 parts of the pattern, but they have to act simultaneously for sustainability to arise. And as I began to really understand the nature of light in the way that I was looking at it, I was inspired to write a 10-book series that I call Cosmology of Light, that basically framed, or the hypothesis or the presumption there was that light is something that exists everywhere. It animates everything. And the way we experience it is just a fragmented aspect of it, because when we think about it scientifically, there's light appears to us as traveling at a constant speed of 186,000 miles per second. But that's just an edge of what light is. Light is something much, much vaster, much deeper. And I would argue that all stable physical systems, chemical systems, biological systems, behavioral systems, complex economies emanate from the body of light in a sense, and are trying to replicate or are trying to bring forth something that is just implicitly creative in the substance of light. Anyway, so that's the stuff that I explored through the writing of the books. But there've been some very interesting applications that I didn't expect. You know, for example, last year when we went into lockdown, global lockdown, then I was associated with a company at the time, and they asked me to put together some light-based workshops. And so I ended up conducting like about 100 workshops, not only for this company, but for other companies as well during the course of lockdown. And the basic structure of that was, you know, one, to examine theoretically what the gist of this cosmology of light was, and secondly, and more importantly, to then apply light, visualizations of light to practical problems, whether at the personal level or in teams or in projects one was working on, or even on distant world situations to the degree possible to try and shift them. So, you know, there were some very interesting experiments that happened during the course of those workshops, and an interesting dialogue that kind of ensued from it. And at about the same time, I'd say this was about a year and a half ago, I had finished a series for Forbes where I was looking at how can you leverage systems thinking, and this was my perception of systems thinking, to actually make change happen at the organizational level. And so that, plus a couple of articles on light that I had also written for Forbes, matured into an organizational sciences certification program offered by Forbes. And there were about 250 companies that took part in it over a multi-month series, and that ended in October last year. But again, that was not something that I expected, and especially the light portion of that. I never expected that light would be admitted into something mainstream, but it was, which is very interesting. The last piece that I'll mention is that the last 4 books that I wrote in the cosmology of light had to do with technology, a certain interpretation of technology from the point of view of light. So I've interpreted quantum computation, artificial intelligence, genetics, transhumanism from the point of view of light. And to me, that's hopefully if it can develop, it's going to address a future problem. So something that we may not experience to the degree that we do now, but I would say that to the degree, just to cap it and to just put the main thought here, is that to the degree that there's fragmentation in technology, meaning that technology is developed in pockets, it's going to have a lot of costs that we don't consider. And those costs become bigger and bigger and become crises. And so in the writing of those books, what I've kind of tried to do is to break the fragmentation that exists, so that when technology is being developed, especially technology that utilizes or is based on quantum computation, then what I'm proposing is that there's actually this entire body of light from which everything has to be referenced, and light has to be accessed in practical ways. You know, so I'm not talking about, in this case, sitting down in meditation, but there's practical ways to actually leverage light. But I'll stop there.
That was fascinating, Praveer. Thank you for that introduction. And I find it particularly interesting how different aspects are being put together. You have, of course, organizations and corporations which have a very particular kind of focus, and you're bringing in a knowledge system and approach which is based on a deeper truth and reality. And there is this marriage happening between two very different worlds, which I think is very interesting. And you mentioned, of course, Savitri at the beginning, and I couldn't help also recognize the four pillars of organizations that you talk about in the context of the four powers of the mother, Sri Aurobindo's famous, well-known text on that aspect. So thank you for that, and we'll come back to you for a little further elaboration. So as we see, each of our participants in very different fields and in their own unique ways have been involved in various challenges that we face collectively. The next round that I want to now start looks at, brings in an element which is more personal. And what we want to try and understand is, how do each of you as individuals deal with this world in crisis? You've spoken about your work, but now we also want to talk about how do you as an individual bring in something deeper into your work, because that's the reason why we are all assembled here. And in the context of All Life is Yoga, how do you bring in that consciousness into the activities that you are involved in? So this is a more open session in the sense, this round you can share more freely, whatever you, to the extent that you wish to, your own journey, understanding, perception in the context of this theme. So Ant, would you like to start?
Yes. Well, it's beautiful. Thank you again. It makes me think of what you said right at the beginning, my special event, Dave, in 2016. Well, my special event, it sounds from the outside, it sounds really brutal, I would say. Huh? It's kind of a Batman event. I had an accident. I had a pretty hard accident. I was jumping with my head first through a tram. So a tram hit me on my bicycle, and I ended up on the driver and I fell into a coma. So for 10 days, I was out of my body, but actually, whilst all the doctors were trying to keep me alive and healthy and bring me back into my body, I had, in fact, I'm 50 now, huh? So I'm not a young boy anymore, unfortunately. But I don't know, for me, these were the most, I would say it was the most intensive time of my life. So these 10 days were just so fantastic. I can't say it differently. It was, I was super, I am until today super sure that I was on Pluto and Mars. I was on 2 planets. And after, I don't know, after having talked to many people and read many books and so on, what rings in me most the bell is that it was connected to the universal consciousness. So that is what actually made it most sense to me, because suddenly the future and the past, it was all one, and I get this feeling that I knew everything. And that,
just to highlight that, Ant, so in fact, while you were in coma, you were having this experience of conscious awareness.
Yes. Exactly. So I was on the planets, and then in less than a second, I was also back and saw my body from outside, and people holding my hand and wanting me to come back into my body and so on. Yes, and quite honestly, it was such a beautiful thing. It made me a lot of think, Kent, what you did when you just showed your video. I was thinking about exactly that. It just said one. We are all one, and there was exactly that. There was just no separation between anything. It was just we are all one, and that was the next 2, 3, 4 years. I couldn't think of anything else. Despite I was then back in my body. Luckily, the doctors worked well. So I'm 100% functional. but this experience just doesn't let me. I mean, it's just since I know that it's exactly that, it's all one. So, our bodies are rented for a certain time, a certain while, yes, of course, but the truth behind it is that we are really all one. And here it's not. I mean, my work since it's much more coming back to your question, Dave. It's much more since really to bring the joy and love that I felt during this 10 days, bringing them back here, bringing really back, I'm thinking back, integrating them into this world here, where we have the body, when it still get the feeling of joy, oneness, love, these beautiful feelings where you feel everyone and every child with my organization that was founded already many years before, so that we can really integrate and feel here, as long as we are on earth in our bodies, these things. And that's something, it is kind of like bringing down some sort of consciousness, this greater consciousness. Maybe we can formulate it like that. Well, and then it is funny, it's also in my legal work. Huh? So 50%, as I said, of my time, I'm a lawyer, and I'm working for a company that is doing all these COVID-19 vaccines. So, and then funnily, all these experiences I had during the 10 days and after it's kind of like I'm bringing them also into that company of 20-something thousand people. Something seems to have changed in me. I don't know, people who knew me before, Dave, you knew me before, you might see it, you don't see it, maybe, I don't know. Question to you. But at least I feel different. I feel different since, and much more aware. And yes, I don't know. Times of crisis is, I think crisis, it's a crisis for our human bodies in that sense. But behind all of that, there is no crisis. So when if you could all really open our eyes to the greater self, there's no crisis, but it's a crisis to our bodies. And that is why we must really think of, to come back to what I said before, to really wind down. So I mean, it's totally consciousness about no plastic and no meat anymore and no alcohol and all of that stuff. So I'm really super down to really the essentials, and having a cup of tea is it's like really being instant in the present moment, and taking much more joy in. And yeah, and then I'm trying to formulate that also through my organization with the children and so on. But Dave, now back to you.
Fascinating, fascinating. I have some thoughts and things that I would like to share, but I think we'll do it after we go over everyone else's sharings. Gautam, coming to you next, one of the things that I've noticed is how the writings of Sri Aurobindo and the mother have informed and influenced your approach, and especially you have this deep love for India and its hope, the role that India has to play in the future. If you want to share anything along those lines, feel free. If there is something else you would like to share, please, Gautam, over to you next.
Thanks, Devdeep. I'm quite a private person when it comes to such stuff, so I'll try to skim on the surface and then maybe, hope to add some value here. Yeah, I love my country, and it's not just a geography. Geography is part of it. It's the people, it's the diversity. I think India has a very unique model to offer to the world. It's a poor country. Despite being the world's 6th largest, going on 3rd, our per capita income is just $2,000, a fraction of what a developed country ought to be. We are way behind. We were a country that had the maximum number of poor. Thankfully, that dishonor is behind us now, and I think poverty is also reducing. My personal thing is, you mentioned the writings of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. In fact, I read so much that sometimes when I write, I find myself writing extremely complex sentences, and I have to step back and, I find the influence of Sri Aurobindo's writings entering into my writings. You are right about that. I've read them so intensely that sometimes there is no he or me. There's just oneness. I just feel I'm an instrument. What bothers me today is that, our topic is the crisis. And I've given it some thought, and I want to stick to the theme of crisis. I find, other than Sri Aurobindo, my other, what I track closely is the Mahabharata. And I find another unique sort of a Mahabharata going on in our country and through the country into us. So it's easy for me to abstract that, we are becoming a Rajasic nation. We were a Tamasic nation for a long time, as Sri Aurobindo has expressed repeatedly in Bande Mataram and several other essays of his. And now we are moving towards Rajas. And that Rajas is also delivering a lot of good things. Of course, prosperity, economic freedom, political freedom, technology. But Rajas is also probably taking us back. The kind of violence that has increased recently, or maybe if it was always there, but is now being accentuated through social media handles everywhere. The politicization of these violence, I mean, there is a person who has died, there is a family, children, and what we are talking about is whether to cry for him or not. Shows to the ridiculous levels to which our state of mind has been captured by things which ought not to be in our consciousness. There is a selectivity. On the other side, how do you fight for dharma? I find myself like how Arjun was, at the beginning of the Kurukshetra. My question, I would rephrase it. How do you fight for dharma? With dharma, that is in the dharmic way, with all principles in place, your conscience in clear. When your opponent doesn't care about dharma, the Kurukshetra battlefield is very different today. Is compassion a weakness? Is weakness being weaponized? Will those who follow the law be mutilated by those who don't? Does the rule of law have any meaning at all today? Because I don't see any punishments happening for such killings, mob killings. The one that happened recently, I assure you, I assure everybody here, he will go scot-free. Not just because of the politics.
Gautam, how do you respond to this challenge? What do you feel?
That's what I'm talking about. So at an abstract level, I can make all these abstractions. How do I deal with it as an individual? I don't know. I don't have any answers. Of course, going into a shell, meditating, being calm is one easy way out, but that doesn't solve the problem. That is not Sri Aurobindo's way. I'm not a revolutionary. I'm a writer. My weapons, my armor are my words, my ideas. How do I pick up a gun? I don't know. So these are the things that are bothering me. Finally, again, as an abstraction, as Sri Aurobindo said, the violence is within us and hence it's outside. What we see outside is a reflection of what's within, and perhaps at an aggregate, that is what is happening in Afghanistan, in Punjab, in Europe. This aggregate, the aggregation of this violent tendencies, which is probably a reflection of what is inside us, is manifesting outside. So I come back to my same critical question. And then it's not that everybody is violent. It's not that everybody is Rajasic, everybody is Tamasic. But those who have these violent tendencies today seem to be winning, and they seem to be powered by another idea called wokeism. And in between all this, these thoughts that they keep bothering me. Unfortunately, I don't have a solution. Maybe I'll need to write a book in order to seek a solution. And that's what I do. I mean, things that I know I can write easily, but I write a book in order to explore things that I don't know. And so these are the themes that are bothering me. I get respite, I get psychological calmness through the writings of Sri Aurobindo, our scriptures, the mother. But then when I step out and see what's going on, I'm unable to sort of fuse my inner with my outer, or let us say my surface mind with my deeper mind. I'm unable to find that bridge. It may sound like a confession, but I mean, that's the truth. And I'm trying to make that bridge somehow. I know it exists somewhere. I just need to sort of take a deep dive into it. It bothers me a lot because it will hold India back. And I don't think this is the time for all this.
Gautam, thank you so much for that honest sharing, because what you've done is really given voice to the angst that so many of us feel in different contexts. You've spoken about a certain situation in the fields that you're involved with, but there's a similar sentiment that has actually led to the reason why we are holding this webinar. And I think it's really important to acknowledge this sentiment of confusion, and also the enormity of the challenge that you have put forth, right? The bridging of the inner reality and the outer reality. So I think it's very important that you've been able to word that challenge in such precise terms. So thank you for that sharing. Kent, would you like to talk a little bit about your work and response, please?
Sure. Thank you so much. I feel this discussion is very special, and I too would like to thank Anuradha, Devdeep, and the Gnostic Centre for inviting me to take part in it. The more that I hear, the more I can sense how special it is. Gautam, I can see why Sri Aurobindo's words you often feel may not be separate from your being, because I feel that his writings remind us of that all-pervading, exquisite beauty that is present all the time, as aren't you personally witnessed when you were in a coma. And I don't especially separate my inner from my outer practice in response to the question Devdeep has posed. But perhaps one thing that I cannot do in a classroom or at my nonprofit is sing. And I feel that I'm always singing. There's always music flowing through my being. It's almost as if I can hear it behind everything, behind the crises. It's as if there's a beautiful soundtrack to the universe that is unfolding, kind of like that body of light from which everything emanates, of which Pravir just spoke. It's so graceful, so benevolent, so compassionate. It's like a song that's breaking the silence and that I cannot live without. I'm constantly taking a breath of. So I'll play you an excerpt of a song that came to me recently. I too like to read the poetry of Sri Aurobindo. I am nowhere near as well versed as Gautam. So I would love to hear what he thinks of the verses I've selected here today. I set these words of his poetry to music. I am my own God. I am my own creature. I have thrown from me the whirling dance of mind. I stand now in the spirit's silence free, timeless and deathless, beyond creature kind, the center of my own eternity. I have escaped, and the small self is dead. I am immortal, alone, ineffable. I have gone out from the universe I made and have grown nameless and immeasurable. I stand now in the spirit's silence free. I am my own God. I am my own creature. I have thrown from me the whirling spirit silence free, timeless and deathless, beyond creature kind, the center of my own eternity. I have escaped, and the snow self is dead. I am immortal, alone, ineffable. I have gone out from the universe I made, and have grown nameless and immeasurable. I stand now in the spirit silence free. I am my own God. I am my own creature. I have thrown from me the whirling dance of mind. I stand now in the spirit silence free. I am immortal, alone, ineffable. I have gone out from the universe I made. I have felt the anger in another's breast. All passions poured through my world self their waves. One love I shared in a million bosoms expressed. I am the beast man slays, the beast he saves.
That was beautiful, Kent. Thank you so much for that song.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, the platform doesn't allow it, but I'm sure if everyone could, we would all be clapping for you.
Thank you.
So, in fact, this is one aspect which which I find quite interesting about your work: the way that you combine poetry and music in carrying forward the message of your organization. The other aspect which I found interesting is the notion of the divine feminine that you mentioned once briefly. I was wondering if you want to make a reference or talk a little bit about that when you were describing the mascot or the spirit animal of the organization. You use the word divine feminine. I'm curious how, I mean, if you want to say a little bit about that for our audience.
Yes, well, as you can see, this snow leopard, which is creeping up on my shoulder, but hopefully protecting me, she is a wild, mystical creature. She is stealth and can appear out of nowhere. She can hunt with strength, boldness, and a unique vision. She can see in the night. She is she has a kind of intelligence that comes from this part, not this part. You see, she walks with her foot forward. And this is the spirit that we see at my organization, my colleagues and me. I have a wonderful group of colleagues. One of them comes from the arts background, museum background. And together we create, we want to build a bridge between mind and heart to allow the students, as I mentioned at the beginning, to have that connection and know that there's a greater purpose that they can find, they can discover on their own, that they're allowed to explore that it's not taboo, and that love is not a taboo subject. And I always associated the divine feminine with that ability to believe in love and not be afraid to explore its majesty and face it. And I admit, I do think that women in particular have a unique ability to hold love and be vulnerable, and yet that vulnerability is their strength. So that to us is something very important, that honesty and ability to bow down to love.
Thank you, Kent, once again. Praveer, would you like to take up this question.
Sure, Deepthi. I'll say that Ken's singing just put me into a different space. So I forgot what you were talking about, but yeah, so let me put myself back into your question. And, of course, the issue is on many different fronts, and here I'm talking about personally, there's been challenges, at a very personal level, and then with family, and then socially, where there's been complete rupture of how things have operated. And, for instance, in the US, people who identify with one party or the other, there's deep fissures that I would say are occurring for the first time. And as people kind of move away from what they've strongly held to be true for decades, the point is that just from a personal level, there's kind of intractable, what appear to be very difficult problems that have surfaced. And, I'll mention one, for instance. I have, a young adult at home, a son of mine. And I think that just, seeing how, he's responded, or what the pain of lockdown and just going into, in a sense, forced isolation, especially here in San Francisco, where it's been taken very seriously. And so there's many of these kinds of problems that have surfaced simultaneously on many different levels. And personally, it's what becomes more prevalent for me is just the complete lack that I have to really solve things. So it's just, things are just so much, in a sense, bigger than anything that I have control over. And this notion of control, if there's anything in the last year and a half, and I felt that I had control, that's, in a sense, that sense of control has been kind of broken down. And so what I find myself doing every morning is generating a much deeper call than I've had to date. So there's something that is much more fundamental, in the sense that I think the difficulty of the crisis on so many different levels is just forcing a different response. And I'm sure many people feel that way, but for me, I'm just talking about what I'm experiencing, is there's something that's much more kind of visceral and vital, and almost like it needs to be to address this challenge that has so many different fronts to it that just seem insolvable by any way that I thought I would have solved them earlier, or any kind of approach. And so I find myself calling, like, who I call, I mean, it's interesting, I'll draw a link back to my work, because I've been intensely interested in systems, but what is a system? It's kind of like when you look at dynamics at different levels of granularity and you try to make sense of them. And I've been intensely interested in light. And to me, these are aspects of, or faces or fronts of a power that's much deeper. And, I may call that power the mother, for instance. These are ways in which she has appeared to me and kind of led me to discover more about herself. And so I find that the call to her is kind of intensified in a sense. So especially the morning hours, it's, as I kind of wake up, and personally, when I wake up, I'm in a completely, I don't know exactly what happens during the night, but I find myself completely externalized. So anything that has that ability to aspire or to love seems to have receded completely into some kind of obscure background. And so I'm left in a place that is very externalized, and I have to really kind of let go of whatever I think I am in order to touch something deeper. And so in a sense, I feel this is the way that the mother is making me connect to her in a different way. So it's kind of like a progressive approach. It's something that's just going on. But that's, for me, that's been the thing that has arisen most strongly during the last year and a half. I'll just pause there. So.
Thank you, Praveer, for that sharing. And what strikes me listening to all four of you is the fact that you come from very different fields. You have very different backgrounds, but each of you have a certain expertise and mastery in your domain, whether it's with journalism and economics, whether it's with your work in child rights, with your work with women, Praveer's work with systems. And you've all come from traditional backgrounds in the sense that you have gone through the system. You have worked in environments which are traditionally entirely focused on approaching problems through the mind, through thinking rationally around them. And yet you've, in your own ways, found an approach that seeks to combine a deeper seeking, a deeper truth, a deeper way of being with the challenges that you're facing. And I think we all agree that we have a long way to go, and that we are all grappling with many challenges at various levels. But I cannot help recognizing that there is something very powerful in the way each of you have expressed your own inner connection and with the work that you are doing, your inner journey with the work that you're doing. And honestly, it leaves me hopeful, because what I see is more and more an opening, a possibility of change taking place through a deeper awareness and deeper perspectives. There are two things that I would like to share before we open out to questions. So one is something when Kent was talking about love, Aunt mentioned universal consciousness. Praveer, you talked about your own journey. And I was reminded of the last few pages of Savitri, when, as for those of you who may not know, Savitri is, of course, a work of Sri Aurobindo where he explores many different, we can't go into what Savitri is now, it will take too long to explain. But when Savitri returns from her journey and she is successful in her mission of bringing Satyavan back. And right at the end, I want to share my screen and point out just a few lines, which I think those of you who are aware of Sri Aurobindo's writings will, of course, remember. So there's a question that is asked to her. She is returned after the great duel with death, where she has returned with successfully bringing Satyavan back to life. And of course, it's an allegory of a much deeper work of consciousness. And so the question that is put to her is, what gleaming, I'm sorry, not this one. It says from here, yeah. Then one spoke there who seemed a priest and sage. O woman's soul, what light, what power revealed, working the rapid marvels of this day, opens for us by thee a happier age. And her answer to that is, awakened to the meaning of my heart, that to feel love and oneness is to live. And this the magic of our golden change, is all the truth I know or seek O sage. And I think that this touches upon quite a few things that have been shared in this session. And finally, I want to share something that the mother wrote about, changing of the world. And again, it touches upon something that has been expressed in this session. So two quotations that I want to read out. The first one is here on your screen. Change yourself if you wish to change the world. Prove by your inner transformation that a truth consciousness can take possession of the material world and that the divine unity can be manifested upon earth. Organizations, however vast and complete they may be, can achieve nothing permanent unless a new force, more divine and all-powerful, expresses itself through a perfected human instrument. And finally, she says, that was in 1952. This is another message from 1967. She says, the world will be made better only in proportion as we make ourselves better. The Vedantic truth that the world is only a projection, a function of our consciousness, is as pragmatically true as it is spiritually true. The ills that humanity suffers from, collectively and individually, stem from the errors that lie at the roots of our ignorant nature. We must be cleansed of these evils individually first of all, if we ever hope to see a clean world outside. A yoga of self-purification is the condition precedent to a yoga of perfection. But in the end, a higher destiny leans over Earth's children, and its ways are beyond calculation. So, yeah, so with that, I can just, I just want to stop the share, yes. So with that, I feel we can now open up this session to some more discussions. If any of the participants, you have questions for each other, please feel free to come in. If those who are listening in either on YouTube or on Zoom, if you have questions, please type them out in the chat box and I'll pick them up and post them to the participants. To any of the panelists, if you have something you would like to share or say to each other, this is your moment. Please feel free.
Not to each other, but maybe I'll have something to say to you, Dev.
Yes.
You know, these quotes that you picked up are perfect, and they encapsulate the philosophical and the essence of what the Mother and Sri Aurobindo stand for and strengthen us with and guide us towards. But I don't know, when you are in the middle of this kind of a crisis, let's take violence, or let's take an economic catastrophe. That bridge suddenly breaks down. The confidence that if you change, the world outside will change shatters. Yeah, I'm sure these are truths. And when you get out of your mind and listen to it from your heart, you can sense that truth. But somehow the outer world perhaps is not ready, or the outer mind, my outer mind, let me be even more specific, is unable to fathom or unable to connect with what's happening in the events outside. So these are nice inspirational words. My personal sort of a struggle today is to bridge this, which I know to be true, with what I see outside, which is true. So somewhere, I think that discovery needs to happen, and perhaps that's my journey and a journey of a lot of people. A lot of people read these words in different ways: Vedantic truths, Vedic truths, through the Puranas, through Sankhya, through the Indian 6 schools of intellectual traditions of India. Everybody knows, yeah, this is correct. But we have barbarians outside, and I don't know whether they will allow us to read this express ourselves. And I don't know when it will happen. I'm strengthened by these words, but at this moment, the crisis that India faces is very different. And I don't have, I'm struggling to find answers for that.
Gautam, you encapsulate for us, that you said your journey, but it's the journey of humanity. This is precisely what we are grappling with. And I think in the measure that we are able to make these words not just inspirational, but also living truths, perhaps, ways may open out for us, which will help us to deal with not just the inner challenges, but also, or therefore, the outer challenges. But I really appreciate very much the perspective that you are bringing in grounding us to the outer challenge that exists, because it's easy sometimes to forget or to be in a little shell of one's own making. And I think that is definitely appreciated. Would you like to respond to Gautam or share something else of your own? Please come in.
Yes. Did you call on me, Devdeep, or someone else?
No. Go ahead, Kent, please.
Okay. Yes, I wanted to respond to that because I can empathize. And there was a time in my life, it was like 15 years ago, when someone said to me, that she turned and said, well, love is the most powerful force in the universe. And I made a kind of a wisecrack right after that. Oh, well, somewhere. And I don't know if I said it out loud or to myself. And suddenly my entire body was on fire. Like I had this experience of a raging fire, and I was up on a podium in front of people on a chair. I could not move. I've never told anyone this experience, and I'm shy that I'm telling it right now, but it lasted for 5 eternal minutes. And I never forgot it. And I thought, okay, there's something that I didn't connect in my own truth, my own body, with that statement. And over the years, it's come back. And as I built this nonprofit, Women for It International, it has become that living truth. And because I've tried to live it, the attempt, the effort, it's like the universe answered my question, my fears and my uncertainty, just by thinking about it and wondering, can that really be? Is that really true? Love is the most powerful force in the universe, bigger, more than that tank, more than what's happening in Afghanistan with all the battles. And I mean, can it really surpass all that? And I wanted to just add that now I don't have that raging fire when I say it. And we have met with many people who have come suddenly out of the blue to help us achieve this mission. Too coincidentally, it's too much of a gift. We've had a famous musician from the Gulf compose music for this movie we're going to make called The Hour, about this unprecedented time. And I just wanted to say that with that one comment, I wanted to respond that it reminded me of that idea that this can't possibly be real, and then trying has given a renewed confidence to me.
Thank you, Kent. Anyone else? Any of the participants? We have 2-3 questions from the audience, but before we take those up, if somebody else would have anything to say, Ant or Praveer, please feel free. Just unmute yourselves.
Yeah, I'll just share something that. So something that I find very practically is. So I work on different projects, even currently, and I meet different people who have very different worldviews. And something that I've been experiencing is that so for example, and sometimes I have to be physically present. So I've been traveling a fair amount as well within the US. So I'm in these different places that I've never been to before. And there's a couple of really interesting things. One is, regardless of what a person's background is, and what belief systems they may adhere to, and what religions they follow, but I find that if there is kind of, let me just use the word sincerity, or if there's like this genuine sense of wanting to do good, or wanting to express the best in work, or on those projects or anything, there's something else that seems to come through. There's something of a very different substance. And this, I find, regardless where I've been to places like, Las Vegas and in the far regions of Texas, and just places that I would never go to earlier, and that are not generally associated with maybe, higher consciousness and things. But the point is that you can feel it, when somebody's kind of like sincere, or when there's like a desire to do something, or to progress in whatever kind of way, there's something else that comes in. And that's something that appears to be happening more and more, but it's just an observation. I wanted to share that. So.
Thank you, Praveer. I think a lot of us would resonate with that. Ant, you had something to say?
Yeah, I found that very beautiful, Javier. And then something you said earlier was the sense of control has broken down, which I liked a lot, because it means basically we come here from the think tank. So the last, I don't know, hundreds of years, we were always here thinking, we're just coming down and working from here. And that makes us so much more honest, authentic, and bringing us down to the sense of oneness and love. And that's just so beautiful. And yes, I fully agree. It's like really, there's just a crack in the system, and this crack brings us down to light. That's for me the real truth behind everything, probably. Something much deeper happening. Yes. That's all I wanted to share.
Thank you so much. I'll just take 3 questions that we have. So the first of these questions is, we'll keep the answers brief because we just have a few minutes left. So the first of these questions is from Ashutosh Bhupatkar. He writes, violence erupts. Gautam, this is for you, so you might want to listen carefully. Violence erupts because individuals and groups want to control people, communities, and societies. What do you trace as the origin of the rise in violence in recent times?
I'm going to give a violent answer to this. So please pardon me if the
But Gautam, also in a global context.
Friendly.
Yeah.
It's not this webinar friendly. I think the lack of wanting to stand up and for your own self or bend before violence, I think that allows bullies to push further and further. In our desire to be compassionate, like Arjun was on the battlefield when partially tamas took over his being. And it took Sri Krishna to bring him, handhold him back to the Rajasic part, do his dharma. I think several of us, and I'm not certain whether tamas is the right word, but there could be different words. I think we are hesitant to use counter violence. And I'm saying violence for protection, violence for preservation, violence for prosperity or general well-being is a good thing. It needs to be done. When we don't do it, when we are trapped by our own false moralities or by lack of a physical strength, or lack of a maddening passion, that's when the weak get bullied, pushed around, hit, and even killed by those for whom violence has now become a religion. I don't have an answer, but all I can say, I can point to Sri Aurobindo. I will lean on Sri Aurobindo to say, at some point, you got to pick up the arms. And is that time now? I don't know. Is that time when they knock at your door? I don't know. But at some point, the way things are going, if they don't change fundamentally through a change in consciousness, then I think a counter violence in order to prevent violence, a violence by the righteous, violence by dharma has to be, cannot be eschewed any longer.
I think one very important point to recognize is that when we speak of violence or love or compassion, that it's very easy to think of them simply as superficial or external truths. So just a thought that one can be violent in many forms. So violence can manifest itself in many forms. One can be full of love and compassion and yet choose to stand firm and believe in principles that must be protected at any cost. So it's also an interesting, you give us an interesting thought there, which is beyond the scope of today's discussion, but also to think about not to mistake love or compassion for weakness, and not to mistake violence for necessarily always in the form of physical violence. Because sometimes when we normally speak of love or compassion, we do not associate it with us, being firm or strong or doing something that needs to be done, but that need not be. I think that what matters more rather than the external action is what is driving that action. So for sure, I think the point you make is well taken, that we must not shy away from dealing with the challenges of the world in a most physical sense if required. So thank you for that. I'll take the next question is to Praveer from Tushar Nath Mohapatra. He writes, I haven't read your books, Praveer. Why do you focus on light? If you can give us a brief answer, Praveer, to why do you focus on light?
Sure. So a very brief answer is that I'm most interested in coming up with a holistic framework for systems. And what I found in light, so for example, let's just take a view that suppose you're a mystic. And as a mystic, you may have certain experiences that you may see light, you may experience peace, you may have joy, or whatever else you experience. But the only thing that has scientific quantities around it is that common bridge or denominator of light. And light, so no matter how you look at it, you approach it scientifically, and there's a lot that's been written about it. We understand its external nature. And light is also something that no matter which part of the world or which history you come from, there's associated with deeper experience. Light gets associated with deeper experience. And so there's automatically a bridge over there. And so in a sense, that bridge has been very meaningful for me, because when I think about the action of light physically, so when light travels at 186,000 miles per second, that's an intentionality. It's an intentionality so that whatever intelligence, whatever love, whatever compactness, whatever mystery is behind can parcel itself out in quanta of light, in a sense. So that's why I focus on light. Light is something that bridges, to me, all the different domains of knowledge. And I found that fascinating to just go into it as deeply as I can to try and, so the books that I've written, basically, really to just summarize, they're an expression of the power of light, but I've chosen mathematics as a means to try and elaborate that power. So I'll stop there.
So I think we've run out of time, so we'll stop here for today. I want to thank once again each of the four panelists for sharing their perspectives, their experiences, and I'm fascinated in the manner in which we have had so many different ways of seeing the world shared here. And honestly, it leaves me with the hope and the faith that even if it may not be evident to us, even if it's not announced in the news, there is change happening, and it's happening slowly. And sometimes what happens behind can take some time to influence the course of events, but it's also inevitable. So with that faith, I will like to end today's session. And thank you once again to the audience for joining us. Anuradha, if you would like to say something and then close out, and then we are done for today.
I would just like to thank everybody. It's been really fascinating. And yeah, I mean, it gives a lot of thought also, because I'm in both the places with Gotham, the angst, and also the hope and seeing the change in small things. That also I witness. Our next webinar is 2 months hence. I'll announce it, 18th October, we'll announce the theme. Thanks a lot.